is happening in different places. So when Anu was mentioning about somebody who came from a rural area, you know, when you're talking about some of the new apps or the new applications or new uses, you need people who understand what the use is going to be put, and sometimes they're best located there. A lot of that is happening. It's still very concentrated, admittedly. The other area, just to tell you what is happening in the industry, is that the biggest source of growth is the emergence of new verticals. In the past, a lot of what we were doing was running the computer systems and back offices, you could say, and then the call centers. But the biggest change now is that we are doing a lot of front-end work. I haven't got because I was running out of space of slides, I already have too many, but it was very quickly one indication of that, the type of people who are being hired today in this industry. You know, it's the largest, the fastest growing sector in terms of urban employment. It used to be 85% of them were techies, engineers or software specialists. Now that's down to about 40%. Another 40% are people with domain skills, whether they might be in the retail business or in the media business or in the telecom business and so on. So that's what I'm trying to say, is that's what's happening in this industry today. So let me just tell you in terms of what is actually happening. One of our biggest programs, the most exciting programs actually NASSCOM has, is last year we decided to make a flagship program is 10,000 startups in the 5 years. So that's what the plan is, and it's already occurring. We are having lots of things happening. And some amazing things are coming up. We wanted to actually catch fire, like the spark that has the prairie catch fire. And there's a lot of cooperation, and I think what NASSCOM is trying to do is get all our big companies try to sponsor and sort of provide the sort of nurturing environment that would give the small guys. So these are all the sort of contextual ones. What is SMAC? SMAC is an acronym for social media, mobility, analytics, and cloud. Now each of these, as I think actually Anu has pointed out, each of these is a disruptive technology. A disruptive technology is one that basically changes the rules of the game. We just had our annual flagship conference in Mumbai, 3 days, and we had people about 1,700 people there, a lot of them from overseas, who were customers of our industry. And the general spirit was, if you think each of these is stupendous or mind-blowing, each one, what will happen with cloud, imagine when you put them all together. And that was what the general thrust of the message was. Anu was there too, so she can give you a fairer, perhaps less biased way. I'm relatively new to this industry. I've been there. It's quite amazing what is happening. So I don't have time to go through all of it, but just to give you, and these are somewhat busy slides. I don't know if you can read them, but I already told you it is transforming. It's very client specific. But what's happening here? Okay, this is probably even tougher to read, but I don't think I have time to go through each of them. So let me tell you what. I'll even skip some of the technical parts, the big analytics. We can come back to any of these. These are just giving all the simple various dimensions of what is happening, and we are trying to explain here what the macro trends are. But I think rather than bore you with statistics or how the logic of what is happening there, let me come to perhaps just give one example. What is happening, for example, in the retail sector. And, I'm sure all of you are already seeing. I mean, isn't it amazing how quickly in Delhi itself the diffusion of the sort of payment systems, the point of sale, small point of sale terminals, how quickly they're diffusing. It's not happening only in Delhi. It's going to happen all over. And okay, so I'm coming to more. Since this covers pretty much the same sort of statistics that Anu has, so let me skip over. Let me tell you about the app economy. Everybody knows what apps are, right? They're all telecom, right? Okay. So, well, there we need to think about what the different types of applications are. There is the one sort of thing, which are the email messengers. Then you have the generic ones, and then you have the industry-specific ones. And the story is, it always is, and if you go back, not just this stage, you go back to the last electronic revolution with the advent of the microprocessor, what happened? The point that was the one that was the critical factor was the sensor at the end, right? The human-computer interface or the human-machine interface at that time. Apps in some ways are precisely that, customizing, the interface for particular, purposes. And for that, you can skip that. We can talk about healthcare. And rather than, again, since Anu has probably covered some of this, and we can go into this, what are the sorts of things that are happening in healthcare using the mobile health clinics, telemedicine, electronic medical record and hospital automation, automation of peripheral healthcare services, picture archiving, managed healthcare services. All of these, of course, were happening even earlier. But what is happening now is, with the advent of the next generation of telecoms and the advent of the cloud, is that this is becoming ubiquitous. So it's no longer, you don't have to be sitting at a computer, you can be walking around, you can be, your waiter doesn't have to go back, you can give you the bill on the table, you can, the doctor or, the repair mechanic, and it's not just what happens in Washington, D.C. Even here, we have the air conditioner repair person can bring an iPad. And, so similarly, on the case of the healthcare challenges, and here I've given some examples of what is happening in particular sectors, even within India. It's, the coverage access issue is being addressed, the communicable diseases issue is being addressed, maternal health, child care, and these are all apps and innovations which are being made and getting ready here. The only thing is that the world is vast. The agenda is vast. So there's a lot more to happen. But my point was, it can happen here, it is happening, and let's make sure that this sort of multiplies manifold. Education, you've probably heard of, the Pratham Education Foundation, some of the things that you see on TV. You have Docomo's tutor on mobile service and other ways of monitoring. Banking and financial services I would distinguish it from the payment systems, but, there's a huge amount of activity already occurring. And again, rather than skip through the mechanics of the business models, what are some of the things it does? It increases access to financial services, and it, providing public service delivery and potential impacts and requirements. Okay, let me just, retail is, these are just some of the things we find already happening quite a bit in India. Consumer trends, what are being observed. And now let me come to, since this is a research conference, let's talk about the policy challenges and what are some of the issues that up to now, I basically talked about what is happening. The lot is possible, can happen, but what we need to do is to make sure it scales up even more. And to do all that, we need to think about, from the whole issue of innovation, when we're talking about disruptive technologies and all that, the story around the world is that the whole ecosystem changes, and you need to understand it from the point of view of both the consumer, the developer, the telecom companies, employers, and other OEMs, the manufacturers. I hope we can discuss some of these in the discussion, but in the policy framework, I was trying to figure out what are some of the things that I should add here. We covered several things. I had actually two more which I thought might be covered in the last one, but they weren't, so I'll mention those. But one is the whole issue of spectrum management. I think that was the topic of the first one. The other one is, since Mr. Ravi Shankar is here, the issue of the Universal Service Fund. I think it's a very important one. It requires attention, especially if we are talking about inclusive innovation. And then there are other sort of things which are often dismissed, but I think we need to be aware of social concerns and people's concerns, things like, you may not think it's important, but people believe, issue of, radio frequency exposure. The two things I do want to say, which are the two hottest areas in regulation and economics overseas in America today, one is the subject of net neutrality, which is sort of conspicuous by its absence of discussion in India. That's, we can come back to that. The other, net neutrality, I don't know how many people are familiar with what the debate is. That's where PITS the Verizons or the telecom companies against the, the Googles of the world. The other issue that is very important is one that was covered last, which has to do with things which we call intellectual property and patent trolls. But those are things which become very important when you have a sort of widely diffused multi-agent or millions of agents working on it. We need to have those things worked out. I wanted to, before I conclude, I have two things to do. One is that I feel that a lot of times when we are talking about this sector, we tend to be looking at it from the point of view of the most yuppie of frameworks. So we talk about hypermobility and such like. But I think the big thing about what is happening today, why it's especially relevant for India, and why I think we are better placed, not just to play, to make a difference in India, but I think around the world, is because what the sector provides is provide inclusive innovation in more ways than one. And I just don't have time to go through. I have made a presentation on this actually in South Africa, which is how many of these inclusive ITS innovation sort of which have their roots in India. And these are just those of you who might want to go and Google these names and check out what all these innovations are. This is again all of them happening in India, and they're quite profound. Incidentally, Aadhaar is by far the largest infrastructure project, personal, I would say probably e-infrastructure project around the world. I want to give you one last one just to give how much of a difference it can make. You know that, just to give you, this is a concrete example, just to make it come alive. There are 40 million people in the world who are blind, who have, most of them, 80% of this blindness is avoidable. So one of the companies in India came up with a device. Some of you may know about it. It's something quite profound, and that's a whole story. I don't have time to go into that. But the relevant thing for us is how this device, once the impact of it, social, economic impact of it multiplies, and jumps, the impact is quantum levels higher once you combine it with the sorts of things we are talking about. The telecom, the connectivity. Again, I don't have time to do it, but perhaps we can explore that. Lastly, I just want to, since as I said, the last thing that I want to talk about is that in the course of while we are doing it, I think it's important that when we are thinking of scaling up and diffusing and all that, to understand what may be different in the case of mobile internet as opposed to internet. I find a lot of times when we sort of talk about internet, we still have in our heads the mindset that you're sitting on browsing on your PC or even on your at home or on laptop. Mobile internet is somewhat different. This emerging research, admittedly, this is all from the US, but you find that the impact and the way it's used differs significantly in some ways, and not so significantly in others. In fact, many ways, some of the counterintuitive results are some of the most exciting ones. And let me just, from there, go on to another one. Mobile e-commerce, we don't have time right now, but on mobile money services. Many people have been amazed as to how come India, with all its IT and other intellectual prowess, has been somewhat slow in this regard. And often it's said, oh, because we are not quite developed, we don't have the regulatory structure, etc. I would just like to say that the experience around the world shows that this is possible at different stages of development. What you need is a vibrant telecom network, and a regulatory framework need not be very sophisticated. Some critical elements are there. We don't need to have very sophisticated legal things also, and you need to have some basics, like if you want to do retail payment, you need to have electronic signature law. So I will, with that, stop and thank you all for your patience. It's somewhat disconnected, but the topic was vast, but I thought I wanted to share some of the excitement with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Anupam Khanna. I think you covered a lot of ground on, and I would think it is an add-on on what Ms. Anumat Kavkar elucidated in her opening presentation. Your focus was on the IT sector, and you are trying to correlate with the telecom sector. And when we were talking about the IT and ITS, I was wondering, the IT and ITS, if we can take total billings with which NASCOM is connected, 90% of it is export.
More, little less.
Little less. So predominantly it is export earning. So that gives me the impression that's a huge thing to look inward, inside, and that's where I think the correlation with what Ms. Madgavkar had made presentation, that if we go on a certain developmental path, we have the opportunity to, and that's prescient about the mobile internet. You did try to bring that difference between internet and mobile internet, and I think as I look at it, with the last 10-15 years having shown us a pathway on the mobile growth, which is more in the voice sector, can we look forward to the mobile internet as the order of things in the new decade ahead? So that's how I look at this thing, that it could be one of the way in which the innovation, service delivery and impact can occur. And your SMAC, which you did mention, I think all of us need to get hooked onto it. Not the smack of the other kind, but the smack of the current kind. So I think that's something which will augur well for us to have a developmental paradigm. You did touch upon the applications economy. The economy as such, we are now trying to verticalize and horizontalize as that's the order of management. Jargonizing and then organizing. So that's how I think we always tend to put it into some silos. But I think the point that you have made is very relevant, that there is the convergence. You used the word convergence in your opening remark, and we're trying to move out of it. I still look at this as a convergence, the convergence of IT, telecom, and if I may add so, the broadcasting or the entertainment sector. Because I think in the IP world, everything is getting converged. So that's where I would like to put the universal services plate on the thing. The National Optical Fiber Network is in a way trying to bring about what is called an infrastructure to let the convergence at the access layer occur, IT, telecom and the entertainment or the broadcasting activities. We have used acronym SMAC. I'm not too sure because whether such acronyms will have catch in the Indian psyche. I mean, even when Pepsi came about, they thought of Dil Mange More. Maybe we need to look at local flavors. So if I may add my own bit, I thought that the best way to talk about SMAC for an Indian audience would mean by talking about Meghdut se Meghraj tak. Meghraj is something like the cloud which has been brought out by the Department of IT, and we all understand Meghdut being part of our cultural attribute. And we can think of Meghdut as maybe mobility and Meghraj as cloud, and sort of just try to connect all of these pieces. I just leave it to the internet advertising gurus. A big guru is here, Mr. Balkrishnan, Ajit Balkrishnan is here, so he would be able to see how things can be caught on and break. But I think we have had Mr. Anupam Khanna's forceful articulation on the role of SMAC, adding to the inclusive growth which should come about, mobile internet and disruptive technologies articulated by Ms. Anu Madgavkar. And in this whole realm, I'd like to thank Mr. Khanna and move on to the next speaker, who is panel speaker, Mr. Rajat Kathuria, and would bring about a new dimension. I'm sure it will enliven our whole debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shankar. While the panel discussion was going on and while you were speaking, I was wondering what new I could bring to the discussion in this panel, and I was trying to think of ICRIER's own comparative advantage or competitive advantage, and say, because Anu and Anupam have both covered really the service delivery, and the service delivery that can be kind of that ride on either the back of the fixed internet or the mobile internet, and what it can provide. So I was thinking, and then I was thought to myself, I was thinking of the dollar bill in the United States. You remember the dollar bills, and it says, "In God we trust, but from the rest demand data." I mean, it's a kind of spin on what's the last bit is an extension. Only the first part is written on the dollar bills. The next part says, "From the rest demand data." So what I thought I would do is that paradigm, and since we are a research institution and we do kind of try and piece all of this together to see what the impacts have been, what is the innovation. The service delivery we've spoken. I'll speak a little bit about it. We are in the process of doing research. So what I'm going to say today, and what you'll see in these slides, is actually the result of work that has been done jointly. Not only am I involved in it, but 3 very young, bright researchers sitting in the audience are also involved in this research. Mr. Sam Petroda in the morning had said that it's absolute imperative to have youngsters involved to actually produce innovation. And so ICRIER is fortunate to have 3 of them sitting here as part of this research. Some of it is old, some of it is ongoing, but let me try and piece this together in the form of something that makes sense, because we are, as I said in the morning, at the end of this conference, and in the lead up to the new government taking over, we are going to come out with a report, and there have been several ideas that have come up in the morning on how we can analytically analyze or analytically put together a framework that makes sense to have some policy choice in front of the government, in front of the new government, based on data. So what does the data tell us? And so the data so far tells us the following, and these are all, I won't spend a lot of time talking about. You remember, if those of you were in the morning, Mr. Petroda talked about all of this. There's several government interventions kind of in the sphere of innovation that are utilizing IT, whether it's IT on telecom, IT on mobile, or whether it is the new the convergence framework. It all falls together for an economist under the paradigm of, look, how can you get growth? Ultimately we are interested, and I will refer back to something that Anu said a little while ago. Ultimately we are interested in getting growth. We want higher, and India's suffering from very low rates of growth for the last 2 years. We want to get back on track. It's not going to be easy, but can IT or can telecom, can mobile play a role in re-energizing that growth? And we feel, yes, it can. What is the data behind that? I will just share with you in a minute. But as you see in this slide, we're saying that there is a documented impact of telecom on growth, be it broadband, be it internet, be it mobile. It's research that we conducted, and I'm going to share some of those results with you. And we're trying to replicate the same thing with what Anupam, and both Anupam as well as Anu have mentioned, is the mobile app economy. So it can becoming a little more granular, but why is this important? Why is innovation important? Why is service delivery important? Why is innovation important? Innovation is important because at the end of the day, if you look at the economic literature on growth, you will notice that countries grow as a result of 2 things, really. One is accumulation of inputs, which is really the easy, cheap way to grow, if you will. More labor, more capital, and you grow. China's done that, India's done that, a host of countries have done that. Accumulate inputs and grow. Do you want to, but eventually you'll be subject to diminishing returns, which I guess we are not yet, because we still have, we're kind of, as economists,